I'm Scott Lucas. This is World Unfiltered. Continuity or change? We're at a moment in Turkey where the same party, indeed the same individual, has held the leadership now for almost 20 years. The AKP, Justice and Development Party, and President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan. But at the same time, others are looking about great change that's occurring in Turkey. Earlier this week, we discussed with Attila Yeşilata about the economic situation and whether or not Turkey is going to be able to withstand challenges to its currency, challenges to its employment situation, challenges to inflation. And that question about change is also political. We have a president who asserts his authority, but at the same time has been criticized and challenged over his son-in-law, who is now the former finance minister. We now have not just his Justice and Development Party, but rival parties formed by former ministers in the Erdoğan government, which are trying to claim some share of parliamentary representation and ultimately possibly to move him out of the office. And for all the talk about changes in the Constitution, does this actually mean this consolidates Erdoğan's power or means that he in fact is slipping? And all of this, of course, in the context not only of Turkey, but of an assertive foreign policy, which carries possibly opportunities, but also risk. Opportunities and risk in Syria, opportunities and risk with the Gulf states, opportunities and risk with Russia. How do we bring the domestic and the foreign together in this changing situation? Well, fortunately, I get to turn it over to someone else. Burak Özpek is one of the leading commentators on this changing situation in Turkey. He does so from an academic post. He is associate professor at TOBB University in Ankara, but he also is an analyst for, I think, a highly valuable website, Daktilo 1984, which considers Turkey in the context of both the domestic situation and also what is happening beyond Turkish borders. Burak, thank you for coming and helping me out on World Unfiltered.
Hi, Professor.
I thought I would start with a question which I also put to Attila Yeşilata earlier this week. But from the economic standpoint, I asked him, is this the year that Turkey finally not only approaches crisis, but is in crisis? I'd like you to ask you the same thing from the political viewpoint. Are we now reaching the moment of crisis in Turkey, not only for President Erdoğan and for the ruling party, but for all Turks in terms of this system that has changed, but has been relatively, if not stable, at least constant over the past 20 years?
Actually, crisis is the normal of Turkey. There is an ongoing crisis situations, and each crisis is triggering another crisis, and the crisis is becoming the normal of this country. And this is happening since 2007, I think, because we are observing the power consolidation process of a populist leader and populist party. So in this process, we have observed that there happened many allies or many partners of Mr. Erdoğan. And the political ideology of Erdoğan was so flexible in this process. In the first decade of his power, he was a very strong advocate of human rights, Europeanization, democracy, civilian control over military. Then he could eliminate the army by the help of his former allies, Gülenist guys in the bureaucracy, in the military, in the judiciary, and in the media, and in the academia, of course. But then something changed. He didn't want, to share the power with these actors, and he didn't want just consolidate the power alone. Then he left his former allies. Then he started a process with the Kurds, which is called peace process. And Erdoğan recognized PKK, a terrorist organization, as the counterpart of this process. Between 2013 and 2015, PKK was a very legitimate actor, actually, of the peace process. Then in 2015, Erdoğan lost his majority in the parliament because the PKK and HDP, the pro-Kurdish party, became extremely legal actors, and they could gain more votes from the society. They did well in June 2015 elections, and this caused AK Party, the Erdogan's party, to lose majority in the parliament. Then Erdogan started to speak the language of nationalism and national security. This means that Erdogan did find new partners for the continuation of his power. There is a pattern here because Erdogan is, implementing his own agenda by the help of some groups inside bureaucracy, inside society, or in academia, in media. And these groups are changing. There is a continuity here. And the process of partner changing, points is creating a crisis for Turkey. For example, in 2016, there happened a coup attempt here, and it was the product of ending relationship between Gülenists and AK Party. And we observed clashes between PKK and Turkish armed forces after 2015 again, and it was the product of peace process. Now we are about to experience a possible, friction between nationalist guys and Erdogan again, and I think we are going to see another crisis. So crisis is the normal of this country because Erdogan has no clear idea about how coalitions are made in democracies, what modern nation state is, how power is shared through legal, channels. He is implementing a very traditional, a very sultanistic way of wielding coalitions. That's why Turkey is always experiencing crisis.
Wow. In 2021, though, what are the key issues that we watch here? Is it the case that it's the economic crisis that comes first? Mm-hmm. And finally, all the issues over foreign capital, the issues over pressure on the currency finally reach a breaking point? Or does the political crisis come first? Is it that the infighting within the Erdogan camp and between Erdogan and other groups escalates even before we reach that economic tipping point? Or is there a relationship between the two that one will bring about the other?
I think they are interrelated because there is a peculiar political economy understanding of Erdogan, especially after 2007. This type of political economy became the, character of this government. This understanding is based on elimination of institutions and leaving more room for the personal, interventions. For example, Ministry of Economics or the autonomous institutions in state bureaucracy or central bank mechanisms were immune from political intervention in previous Turkey, actually. But Erdogan thinks that as a populist, autonomous institutions and bureaucratic autonomy is the instrument of elites to dictate certain policies over the politicians. And politicians, especially himself, represent the voice of silent majority. That's why he defines himself as a warrior against elite. That's why he could justify his intervention into bureaucratic mechanisms. And this is undermining the governance capacity of Turkish state. This is a political attitude, but it has, economic repercussions at the end of the day.
So this idea of populism, which is almost in a sense the politician Erdogan, his challenge that he has to win is against the bureaucracy in a way. I mean, populism, of course, is a term which is very much in vogue in the West. Is his populism similar to a Salvini in Italy, of a Le Pen in France, of an Orban in Hungary? Or is this a very distinctive type of populism in the Turkish context, which is different from what we might see in Western Europe?
I think populism is a thin-centered ideology, which means that populism can be combined to another ideology. So we can talk about Islamist populism, we can talk about liberal populism or left populism or right populism. And I think we have experienced every kind of populisms in Turkey in the last 2 decades. In the first 10 years, for example, we have observed a liberal populism because it was liberal actually. AK Party was defending human rights, democracy, the liberal ideas, civilian ideas, but it was doing that in a populist way because it was creating a polarization in the society. It was defining an elite class, and AK Party was situating itself as the defender of silent majority. In 2003, in 2004, for example, AK Party defined secular and middle class people as white Turks. White Turks mean that there are some kind of Turks who are getting privileges from the military-backed regime, actually. That's why he used democracy as a discourse to subvert actually military-backed regime. But it was still populism. It was an illusion. Most of the liberal circles in Turkey, most of the liberal circles in Europe supported Tayyip Erdoğan because he was just fighting against an authoritarian, entity, which was military. But Erdoğan did so in order to have a new policy-making room for himself. But he was doing liberalism in a populist way. Then Erdoğan initiated a peace process with the Kurds. Erdoğan did conduct this process in a populist way. He created a polarization in the society. On the one hand, we have peace lovers. On the other hand, we have peace haters. We didn't discuss the situation in a rational or in a technical way. Erdoğan defined the opponents of peace process as the people who were taking the advantage of countries' war against terrorism. Again, he created a polarization, and again, he became the advocate of silent people, silent majority. Then he adopted nationalism, and again, he did nationalism in a populist way. He did leave no room for the alternative voices in this society. And he identified those who criticized the government's policy as the traitors, as the extensions of the Western powers in the country. So we observed every kind of populism in Turkey. However, populists have a playbook while undermining democracy. Democratic backsliding is a very hot issue among political scientists, and there are some certain points which are implemented by all of the populist regimes all around the world. For example, they demonize the opposition groups. They do not regard opposition groups as legitimate counterparts. This is happening in Turkey. They, violate the autonomy of institutions. For example, Poland, this strategy, and Kaczynski wanted the judge to resign in order to appoint new judges, in order to get rid of the judicial checks and balances mechanisms. A third step is related to academia and civil society. Like Orban did in Hungary, Erdoğan also initiated a war against academia. For example, in January, the best university of Turkey, Bosphorus University, the Boğaziçi University, was started to be ruled by a guy who is not very, compatible with the criteria of this university. We have some regulations which is undermining the fairness and freedom of the election process. Last year, for example, 2 years ago, when the local elections were held in Turkey, AK Party lost Istanbul municipality in March, but this party did not accept the result, and there happened another election. And it was a clear intervention by AK Party to the higher electoral council. It's a playbook, and AK Party did everything in this playbook during the last 20 years.
So let me be blunt. Is this now in the guise of populism or using certain instruments of populism? Is this now an authoritarian system?
Actually, yes, because authoritarian system means that there is just little room for the opposition. So Turkish system is on paper democratic. Yes, we have elections, but they are free elections, not fair elections. On the other hand, if the ongoing political composition threatens the survival of AK Party, some political figures, some political parties could be suspended by the help of judiciary and by the help of parliament. Alternative voices in the media could be suspended. Alternative figures in the academia could be sacked. So these are indicators of authoritarianism. However, let me note that this is not a high-quality authoritarianism. We have experienced high-quality authoritarianism when Soviet Union was alive. It was a very rule-based, elite-based authoritarianism. Now we have a very cheap authoritarianism under AK Party because there is no rule of law. There is no predictability here. Again, AK Party needs to get the votes of people, needs to gain legitimacy, actually. That's why AK Party is not a predictable government. Rule of law is very flexible thing. For example, party members could be tolerated, AK Party members could be tolerated, but non-AK Party members could be punished just because they committed the same crime. It is a very cheap authoritarianism. You cannot compare Turkey with Iran. You cannot compare Turkey with China, because in China, we have Chinese Communist Party, and Chinese Communist Party is a tutelage mechanism over the political system. It's authoritarian. It's a very bad thing, but there is a tutelage mechanism over politics. In Iran, we have a religious scholar class. They are tutelage mechanism over Iranian system. They are deciding the limits of political liberties. It's bad, it's authoritarian, but there is a predictability here. In Russia, there are intelligence services which determine the limits of political system. It's bad, it's authoritarian, but again, Russia is a predictable state. In Turkey, we don't have any tutelage mechanism. The tutelage mechanism is AK Party, and AK Party needs the popular support in order to keep, in order to preserve its legitimacy. That's the problem of Turkey.
So Turkey become like Syria? Has Erdogan and the AK Party become like Assad and the Ba'ath Party in terms of an unpredictable authoritarianism?
Actually, I am against to compare Turkey with any Middle Eastern case. Before AK Party came to power, Cengiz Çandar, for example, was comparing Turkish army and the army-backed regime with the Ba'athist regimes of Middle East. It was a mistake, actually. Now it is, again, a mistake, because there are many other parameters that you cannot compare Turkey with Syria. The Syrian regime was unpredictable. Yes, it was a black box regime. Turkey has a black box regime as well, but there was no limit of Syrian regime. In Turkey, the government has some limits. Government has to obey some limits. For example, Turkish economy is better than Syria, of course, and the Turkish government cannot, undermine economy for the sake of the arbitrary decisions. Personalistic rule is available, but there are some limits of that.
Thank you. So I just thought I'd get that clarified. Well, and I guess one other important clarification for me, this move to authoritarianism, as unpopular as it may be, is it driven by the AK Party or is it driven by Erdogan? Is it the party or the man who's propelling this?
A very tough question. I think it is the man, but the party is still alive. It is not like a professional political party. It's like a company, actually, a company ruled by Erdogan. And I think if we are talking about authoritarian leaders, we have to know that they initially aim to eliminate their rivals inside the party. So it's a clear signal. If a political leader starts to eliminate its competitor in the party, this means that this guy is going to eliminate other political parties in the system. If you look at the story of Erdogan, he established AK Party with very prominent figures of political Islam. And the other guys were very intellectual, and they rejected orthodox vision of political Islam, and they argued that Islam could be compatible with European Union values. Islam could be compatible with democracy. In 2001, they formulated a new idea because Orthodox version of political Islam was not very popular in Turkish society. They created a center-right party. They created a conservative Democrat party. That's how AK Party could attract more votes than Orthodox political Islamist parties. Erdoğan actually had no idea about the transformation of this, political tradition. He is not an intellectual. He has no connection with university professors. He does have very limited knowledge about the literature, but the guys who were with Erdoğan had some abilities actually. In the last 20 years, we observed that Abdullah Gül, for example, the former president of Turkey, was eliminated. Abdulatif Şener, who was a minister in Erdoğan's first cabinet, was eliminated. Bülent Arınç, he was head of parliament, was eliminated. And actually, these figures were intimidated by social media trolls and some journalists who are being controlled by, a family member, Erdoğan's son-in-law. Because Erdoğan's son-in-law's brother is, the director of Turkuaz Media Group, which is the main media group of Turkey, and the head of communication unit is very close to Mr. Albayrak, Erdoğan's son-in-law, and there is a actually network here, and they intimidated. They conducted a defamation campaign against the intellectual figures inside AK Party. That is how Erdoğan could get rid of checks and balances of AK Party mechanism, AK Party's institutional mechanism. He dominated the party first, then he dominated the country second.
Okay, but are we going to see any modifications by Erdoğan? In November, his son-in-law, who you just mentioned, Mr. Albayrak, was removed as finance minister. This was after the lira had depreciated by 40% in value and foreign reserves had been lost at an alarming rate, but he did remove him. Last month in February, we had a speech from President Erdoğan who is promising economic reforms and human rights reforms. Do you think there is any substance that he will modify, he will change course, or is this just simply a cover for him buying a bit of time while he proceeds on his consolidation of power?
The system constructed by Erdoğan is losing ground. AK Party lost Istanbul and Ankara municipalities in 2019. It was a clear signal for AK Party because, yes, AK Party has its own political economic mechanism. AK Party is providing money and privileges for its supporters. But on the other hand, there were some people who were getting the advantage of AK Party government in an indirect way. For example, the economic policy of AK Party was serving the interest of many people in Turkey. That's why they were voting AK Party for the continuation of stability. Upon the economic crisis in the summer of 2018, we experienced a currency crisis, after, an American citizen was in prison in Turkey and Erdoğan and Trump experienced a, tension. Then we experienced a currency crisis in Turkey. Then the economic indicators started to say that there is something wrong with this economic program. In local elections, AK Party lost municipalities of Ankara and Istanbul. And then COVID happened, and COVID, paralyzed the economy in addition to governance problems. Then unemployment rates dramatically increased, inflation rates dramatically increased, and everybody started to talk about economics. People were talking about security, people were talking about, political issues, people were talking about foreign policy issues, but now everybody is talking about economic problems. And Erdoğan's son-in-law was the person who was responsible for that, and he could be sacrificed in order to, calm the reaction of the people. It might be a strategy. I don't know. I have no idea what is going on behind the walls of presidential palace, but I think that could be a strategy. There might be another explanation. For example, Biden won the elections. Al-Bayrak and Trump's son-in-law, Kushner, was very close. Erdogan probably sent a clear signal to Biden by changing the economic, administration, and he gave a message and told that I am ready to work with you. This might be another option. Or there might be some personal issue between Erdogan and his son-in-law. I don't know, but what I know about Erdogan is he is not the person who could implement a serious economic policy. So he must be very unhappy with the ongoing economic program. The ongoing economic program is good. It is, a professional economic program. People should pay more taxes, government should spend less money, and then we can heal the economy. And we are going to get the fruits of this economic problem in 2 years. That's a very professional economic program. But Erdogan is not cut for this.
But that raises this interesting question, because you've portrayed a man who has formed alliances, then turned against allies. Mm-hmm. Alliance with a Gulenist, turned against the Gulenist. Mm-hmm. Alliance, or at least accommodation with PKK. Is it possible that Erdogan turns against that last group that mm-hmm. really keeps him in place, who are the economists? Could he turn against the economic advisors who are doing the professional job of keeping Turkey afloat?
Yeah, it is possible. If you implement a very harsh economic program, you have to adopt a very, soft language in politics. This is a very clear formulation for politicians. You are implementing a very harsh economic program. Mm. You cannot exclude any certain social group. You cannot reject to be involved in dialogue with any certain social group. But the partners of Erdogan are very inclined to intimidate or stigmatize the opposition groups. That's the way of keeping their power. That's the game that they know. There is this group inside AK Party who are coming from political Islamist tradition. They argue that AK Party has to speak with the Kurds. AK Party has to make some reforms. AK Party has to make some, foreign policy shifts. AK Party has to meet the demands of Biden administration. That's how we can support economic program. That's how we can get votes from the diverse sections of the society. On the other hand, the partners of Erdogan, plus Erdogan's son-in-law, plus Erdogan's advisors, are very inclined to sustain the ongoing discourse based on national security and nationalism. There might be a clash between these two groups in the future.
So if we are in not a new crisis, but the latest crisis, is this the point where it's opposition parties, such as the main opposition party, the CHP, who prevail in elections? Mm-hmm. Or is it the case that the biggest threat to Erdogan comes in a way from within, the former allies in the AK Party who have now formed their own parties, the former foreign minister, Mr. Davutoglu, I think the former interior ministry with the Good Party? Is that the bigger challenge to Erdogan, that it's his former allies, conservative allies, who prevail?
It's a very complicated question because after 2 decades, I think everybody in Turkey learned that it is not a reasonable thing to have a coalition with Erdogan. So Erdogan can build coalitions and Erdogan can defect, and coalition members can turn into a criminal, criminal figure. So it is a very expensive strategy actually for the opposition figures. If Erdoğan can leave Nationalist Party now, it is not possible for him to find another partner among opposition parties, because everybody knows that Erdoğan just takes the advantage of the coalition, and he can easily and he can quickly turn his back. Erdoğan is not inclined to form coalitions in a transparent way, in an institutional way. For example, he is in a coalition with Nationalist Party now, but no one knows what the responsibilities are. No one knows what they are talking, what the coalition members are talking. No one knows what the problems are, actually. Everything is happening behind the closed doors. And this was similar with Gülenists, this was similar with Kurds, and now it is taking place with the nationalist guys. And everybody in the opposition learned that it is not very reasonable to be in a coalition with Erdoğan. So Erdoğan has developed his own strategy to divide opposition parties, because if opposition parties could build a front, a unified front, this will be end of AK Party government. That's why Erdoğan is supporting ideological figures in the opposition parties. Erdoğan is providing platform in the media for the discontents of the opposition parties. Erdoğan is supporting radicalism among opposition parties. For example, Erdoğan wants to see, marginal left-wing guys, occupying streets and, the challenging his authority. He would be happy. He would be happy
because that turns them into the foe against which the security state can operate. Yeah. Okay, all right. Let's bring this to a peak by looking at a solution. So I read of a solution by a fellow you might know named Burak Özpek. He writes last autumn. He says we can strengthen the center, right? So we can strengthen the center in terms of a dialogue, in terms of an agreement on, I think, both values and actions. How does that strengthening of the center take place in Turkey? Does it come from the institutions? Mm-hmm. Does it come from the parties? Does it come from civil society? How do you build this center that you say is needed to get Turkey out of crisis?
Yes, the idea of center has been speculated by Anthony Giddens in 1990s, and this strategy worked for the left parties because they left the ideological character, and they initiated a dialogue process with other segments in the society. So dialogue itself and negotiation itself are the indicators of a centrist ideology. By centrism, I mean political parties might advocate different political visions. They could have different political programs, different political ideologies, but the methodology of discussing them in the public space has to be predicated on some certain rules. Those rules has to be based on respect and security for the opinions of others. So ongoing negotiations might create a new center in the society. In an article that I wrote for an academic journal, I argued that AK Party managed to decide the axis of public debate. That's how it managed to keep its power. Axis of public debate was based on morality in Turkey, and AK Party took the advantage of moral relativism. For example, if Turkey decides to make a cross-border operation towards Syria, it is not possible to discuss costs and benefits of this policy or possible outcomes of this policy. People are just divided into two camps. On the one hand, you can see nationalists. On the other hand, you can see peace lovers. Yes, loving your nation might be a moral value. Loving peace might be another moral value. And AK Party takes the advantage of clashes of two moral values. But rationality or technicality are not available in public debate. Let me give you another example. During the presidential referendum, there were TV shows before the referendum, of course, and people were discussing presidential system. Guess who were not on TV shows? Professors of political science, professors of law, and prominent figures who were studying on presidential systems for years were not available on TV shows. That's why center should be, predicated on technical public debates or rational public debates and open negotiations. We have different political parties in Turkish politics. And there are Social Democratic Party in opposition. We have pro-Kurdish party in opposition. We have a center-right nationalist party in opposition. And we have new conservative parties in opposition. If they start to defend their own ideology, it is not possible for them to establish a new unified front against the government. But if they speak the language of technicality, language of rationality, center could be a magnet and attract them. They could easily find a way to form a coalition. So ideological extremism is the enemy of centrism. Romanticism is the enemy of centricism. Or emotional reactions are enemies of centricism. Instead, I suggest rationality, technicality, and open negotiation for the opposition parties. If they do so, they can create a counter coalition against that party.
Okay, final question. You've mentioned that Turkey has had populisms. It has had left populism, right populism, Islamist populism. Is it possible to have a populism of the center?
Good question. Actually, yes. But for centrist populism to occur, I think they have to find enemy, and they have to put this enemy on par with elitism. Of course, AK Party has its own cronies. Of course, there are many guys who are taking advantage of this government, and there are privileged groups. But AK Party still claims that it is, representing the ordinary, regular people, silent majority. I think centrist populism might be available in Istanbul's mayor, Ekrem İmamoğlu. He is emphasizing the crony capitalist mechanism around AK Party, and he is saying that, no, I'm not populist, I'm representing everybody, there is no division in this society, but he is trying to identify AK Party as an elite-based, white Islamist and crony party. If you want to define Ekrem İmamoğlu in that way, go on, that might be correct, but actually centrist populism might appear first in Turkey, all around the world. If you say this.
We've done, I think, great things on World Unfiltered, but this may be the first time that we have had an analyst define a new political movement. So Burak Özpek, thank you for centrist populism and much more in this analysis of where Turkey is heading in 2021. I do hope you'll come back later on this year to give us an update on how both populism and Turkey are doing in these circumstances. Thank you so much. Let me also thank the fine folks at Deep Dive Politics for keeping us on air. Let me thank most of all the viewers, you folks who have come along and learned with me today. Remember that you can follow Deep Dive Politics on Twitter at @dive_politics. We're on Facebook at Deep Dive Politics. And all of our videos, including this one, are also available as podcast on Spotify. But for now, let me conclude again by thanking Burak Özpek and by saying to all of you, stay safe, stay sane, be decent to each other. I'm Scott Lucas. This has been World Unfiltered.